I never knew silence could hurt like that. The kind that fills your lungs until you can't breathe. The kind that turns your heart into a clock, ticking too loud in your ears. I remember the color of that moment. The pale gray of the kitchen floor, the blur of light from the window, the way the world tilted as I tried to reach for my inhaler and found nothing there. My chest burned. My hands clawed at empty air. And in that frozen second before darkness came, I thought of them. My grandkids. The same two faces I had kissed goodnight 1,000 times. The same hands that had once held mine when crossing the street. The same hands that had taken my inhaler and hidden it for a joke. When I woke up in the hospital, the world felt wrong. The ceiling was too white, the air too sharp. A machine beeped softly beside me, keeping time with my heart. My throat ached. My chest felt like it had been scraped out and filled with stones. "Easy there, Mrs. Joe," a nurse said gently. "You had a bad asthma attack. You're lucky your neighbor found you." Lucky. That word tasted bitter. It took me a few moments to remember everything. The smell of burnt toast, the laughter from the living room, my wheeze, faint at first, then sharp. I'd called for them. "Liam, Ellie, bring me my inhaler, please." Silence. More laughter. Then the sound of footsteps, quick and retreating. I'd crawled toward the coffee table where I always kept it. The spot was empty. My hand had brushed a folded piece of paper instead. "Can you breathe without this, Grandma?" LOL, written in blue marker. I remembered the sound of my own gasp like something tearing inside me. After that, just pain and panic and the cold floor against my cheek. The nurse's voice brought me back. "Your grandson's been calling. He sounds very worried." I closed my eyes. Worried. That word didn't fit him right now. He should be ashamed, terrified, but worried? That felt too easy. When they discharged me 2 days later, the doctor told me to avoid stress and keep my inhaler close. I nodded, smiling politely. Inside, something cold had taken root. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, like disappointment turned to stone. Liam met me at the door when I came home. 16, tall, hair sticking out like he'd been running his hands through it all day. "Grandma," he started, eyes wide, voice trembling. "I'm so sorry. It was just a joke. We didn't—" I walked past him. The air in the house felt heavier than the hospital's. Ellie was sitting on the couch, clutching her phone like a shield. "Hi, Grandma," she whispered. 14, old enough to know better. I hung my coat, straightened the doormat, and said the only words I could manage. "Where's the note?" Liam blinked. "What note?" "The one you left on the table." He looked down. Ellie's eyes filled with tears. "We threw it away," she said softly. "We didn't think—" "That's the problem," I said, my voice quiet. "You didn't think." They followed me into the kitchen, talking over each other, apologizing, promising they'd never do it again. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to grab them both and hold them like I did when they were small and scared of thunder. But I couldn't. Not yet. Their words felt like pebbles thrown against a wall. The wall was me. That night, I sat alone at the table. The inhaler beside my tea, my hands still shaking. Their laughter echoed in my mind, overlapping with the sound of my own gasps. I wasn't angry at the prank itself. I was angry at what it meant, that they saw me as weak, fragile, something to mock. Somewhere between raising their father and losing my husband, I had turned into a joke. When their father, my son Mark, called later that evening, I almost told him everything. Almost. But then I heard the exhaustion in his voice, the weight of bills and deadlines and a marriage stretched too thin. "How's Mom's house treating you all?" he asked, distracted. "The kids aren't giving you too hard a time, I hope?" I looked at the two silhouettes sitting on the couch in silence, faces lit by the glow of their phones. "We're fine," I said. My voice didn't even shake. But that night, lying in my bed, I stared at the ceiling and made myself a promise. I would not let this pass like another small cruelty swept under the rug, not because I wanted revenge, because I wanted them to understand. I wanted them to see me again. Over the next few days, I went about my routine quietly, made breakfast, watered the plants, pretended to forget. The kids relaxed, thinking the storm had passed. But inside me, something had shifted. I started making calls. The first was to an old friend from church, Marianne, who ran the community center. The second was to Mr. Alvarez, my lawyer, the same man who had helped my husband and me set up the trust for this house. I'd like to discuss some changes, I told him. He hesitated, then agreed to meet that afternoon. When I got back, Ellie was in the kitchen filming some dance for her phone. She stopped when she saw the folder in my hands. "Grandma, are you okay?" I smiled. Better than ever. Liam came in behind her, still guilty but curious. "Where'd you go?" "Just sorting a few things," I said, "making sure everything's in the right hands." They didn't ask what I meant. Maybe they didn't want to know. But later that night, when they heard me on the phone with the realtor, whispering about valuations and property transfers, they finally looked scared. That was good. Fear, I've learned, is sometimes the first step toward respect. I didn't raise cruel children. I raised careless ones. And carelessness can be corrected. Not with anger, with lessons, real ones. By the end of that week, the for sale sign was standing proudly on the front lawn. The kids stared at it through the window, their faces pale, their voices small. "Grandma," Ellie whispered, "you're selling the house?" I took a slow sip of tea, feeling my lungs open, the steady hum of life inside me. "No, sweetheart," I said softly. "I'm selling a reminder." They didn't understand then, but they would. Very soon. And when they did, they'd never forget to breathe again. The next morning began like any other, except for the quiet. Not the usual kind of quiet filled with the hum of the refrigerator or birds outside the window. This one had weight. It pressed against the walls and settled in my bones. Ellie and Liam didn't come down for breakfast. I made pancakes anyway because habits are stronger than anger. I flipped the last one onto the plate, poured syrup over it, and waited. The smell usually dragged them out within minutes. Not that day. At 9, I called up the stairs. "Breakfast's getting cold." Silence, then whispering. Footsteps. Finally, Liam appeared, messy-haired and pale. He stared at the for sale sign through the kitchen window like it was a gravestone. "You're not serious, are you?" he asked. I wiped my hands on a towel. "I've never been more serious in my life." "But where will we go?" Ellie's voice came from the stairs, small and trembling. She looked even younger than 14. "Dad said we could stay here while he sorted things out. Grandma, this is our home." That word, our. It stung, but it also made me strangely proud. They'd grown up here after all, learned to walk on these floors, painted messy pictures at this table, chased each other through the garden I'd planted with their grandfather. That was exactly why they needed to understand what it cost to have something and what it meant to lose it. "You're right," I said softly. "It's our home. But sometimes when people forget to respect what they have, life reminds them how fragile it is." Liam frowned. "We said we're sorry. We didn't think you'd—" "That's the problem," I interrupted. "You didn't think, and I nearly died because of it." They both froze. There it was, out in the open. The words hung in the air like smoke. I hadn't said them aloud since the hospital. "I know you didn't mean harm," I continued, "but meaning doesn't erase consequences." Ellie's eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, please, we'll do anything. We'll—" I held up my hand. "No, Ellie, I'm not punishing you. I'm teaching you." That afternoon, I met with Mr. Alvarez in his downtown office. He was kind, older now, gray hair framing a sharp face. "Joe, you sure about this?" he asked, tapping the folder on his desk. "This house means a lot to you." "It still will," I said. "I'm not leaving them on the street. I'm giving them perspective." He raised an eyebrow. "You always did have a dramatic streak." I'm old, I said with a smile. Dramatics, all that's left. We finalized the paperwork quietly. I wasn't actually selling the house. Not yet. The sign outside was real enough, but the listing was private, directed through a friend of mine from the church board who owed me a favor. The price was set just high enough to attract whispers, but not real buyers. I wanted them to think it was slipping away. When I returned home, the kids were cleaning, voluntarily. Dishes stacked neatly, the living room vacuumed, even the old rug beaten out on the porch. It was almost funny. Fear made them better housekeepers than love ever had. Liam looked up from the couch cushions he was fluffing. We cleaned, Grandma, like everything. I see that, I said. Looks wonderful. He hesitated. So, does that mean you'll call off the sale? I smiled faintly. Let's see how long the clean air lasts. That evening, I sat on the porch, inhaler beside my cup of chamomile tea. The sunset painted everything in gold. Ellie joined me quietly. She didn't speak for a long time, just watched the light fade. Then, in a small voice, she said, "When you couldn't breathe, did you know it was us?" I looked at her. Yes. Were you scared? Yes, I said again. More than I've ever been in my life. She nodded, eyes glistening. I'm sorry, I thought it'd be funny. Liam said it'd make you yell, not almost die. I finished softly. She nodded. Grandma, she whispered. I was the one who wrote the note. For a moment, I just sat there, letting her words sink in. Then I reached for her hand. Ellie, mistakes are like storms. You can't stop them once they start, but you can decide how you'll rebuild after. She pressed her face into my shoulder and cried, the kind of crying that comes from guilt, not pain. I let her. I didn't say another word. When Liam came out later, his eyes red, he stood on the porch steps and said quietly, "You're not really going to sell, are you?" I looked at him over the rim of my teacup. That depends on what you're willing to do. He frowned. Do what? Learn, change, and prove it. The next week was strange. They hovered around me constantly, offering to cook, help with laundry, run errands. Liam even fixed the loose porch railing that had been broken for months. I didn't stop them, let them earn their peace. But something else began to happen too. They started talking. Not the short, polite exchanges they used to give me, but real conversations. About school, about their friends, about their father's long work hours. I listened. Maybe for the first time in a while, they saw me as more than an old lady taking up space. Then, one afternoon, as I was watering my garden, Liam came running out with his phone. "Grandma, Dad's calling!" Mark's voice filled the speaker. "Mom, what's this about you selling the house?" "The kids are freaking out." I sighed. News travels fast. "Mom, what's going on? They told me what happened with the inhaler. God, I'm so sorry." "It's handled," I said. "We're talking, learning. They need to feel the weight of what they did." "You scared them half to death," he said. I looked at the inhaler glinting on the patio table. "Then maybe we're even." That night, Liam left a note on my door. We looked up how asthma works. We didn't know how dangerous it really was. "We're sorry, Grandma. For real this time." I kept the note, tucked it under the glass on my bedside table. But by the following weekend, something unexpected happened. A black sedan pulled up outside. A woman in a navy blazer stepped out, clipboard in hand. The kids were watching from the window when she rang the bell. "Mrs. Taylor?" she asked politely. "I'm here to appraise the property." Liam's face went pale. "You mean it's actually for sale?" I smiled slowly. "Maybe." Ellie grabbed my hand. "Grandma, please don't." I turned to the appraiser. "Give us a few minutes." She nodded and stepped back onto the porch. Inside, I faced them both. "Do you remember what you asked me that first morning? Where will we go?" They nodded. "I want you to think about that. Where would you go if you lost everything because of one careless act? Not because someone hated you, but because they stopped taking your life seriously." They didn't answer. just stood there, small and quiet like they finally understood. I let the silence work on them for a long moment before I said softly, "Now go tell the nice lady she can come back another time. We have more important things to fix than walls and floors." That night, Liam knocked on my door again. "Grandma?" "Yes?" "Would you teach us? About when you get sick, about what to do?" I smiled into the darkness. "I thought you'd never ask." But deep inside, I knew this lesson wasn't over. Not yet. Because 2 days later, I received a phone call from the realtor's office. A real offer had come in. A good one. And the kids overheard every word. The fear that returned to their eyes told me something big was about to happen. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the lesson I'd planned to teach next. The air in the house felt different after that phone call. I could feel the tension in every corner, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The kids didn't speak at dinner, just stared at their plates. I could hear the quiet clink of forks, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the old clock on the wall. Then Liam finally blurted it out. "Who made the offer, Grandma?" I took a sip of water before answering. "A woman from the city. Says she's been looking for a place like this, quiet with a garden." Ellie's voice trembled. "You're really going to sell, aren't you?" I looked at her, then at him. Their faces were so young, so scared, and yet, maybe that fear was good for them. I'd lived long enough to know that fear can either break a person or make them pay attention. "I haven't decided," I said quietly. "But it's nice to know someone still sees the value of this house." Liam's jaw tightened. "So that's it? We just get thrown out because of one stupid mistake?" "Nearly killing someone isn't a stupid mistake," I said, my voice calm but heavy. "It's a wake-up call." He pushed his chair back. "You're being cruel." "Am I?" I looked at him steadily. "You took away the air I needed to live, Liam. All I'm doing is giving you a taste of what it feels like to not know if you'll have a place to breathe tomorrow." He didn't say another word. He just stood there, eyes glistening, then stormed out the back door. The slam echoed through the house. Ellie started to cry, and I reached across the table, covering her hand. "He'll be fine," I said. "Sometimes pain teaches faster than comfort." That night, I sat by my window with a cup of tea and the inhaler beside me. I watched the lights flicker on in other houses, families laughing, televisions humming. My reflection in the glass looked tired but steady. Somewhere deep down, I wondered if I'd gone too far. But then I remembered the sound of my own choking, the coldness crawling up my neck as I'd gasped on that kitchen floor. I remembered the note, "Can you breathe without this, Grandma?" LOL. No, I hadn't gone too far. Not yet. The next morning, Liam was gone. His bed unmade, window open, backpack missing. Panic shot through me before reason caught up. He was 16, angry enough to run, smart enough to come back. I waited 2 hours before calling Mark. "Mom? What do you mean he's gone?" He took his bag, no note. "I've called his friends, but none of them have seen him." Mark cursed under his breath. "I'll leave work right now. Maybe he just needs to cool off. You know how he is." "Yes," I said quietly. "I do." By evening, he still hadn't returned. The police said to give it 24 hours. Ellie sat on the couch hugging one of his hoodies, her face pale. I sat beside her, my hand resting on her back. Every hour felt heavier than the last. At 2 a.m., headlights flashed outside. I rushed to the window and saw him getting out of a car, his friend Noah's. Relief flooded through me, but it didn't erase the anger. I opened the door before he reached it. "Where have you been?" I demanded. He froze in the doorway, face streaked with tears. "I went to Dad's office," he said hoarsely. "I wanted to tell him you were selling the house. I thought maybe he could stop you." I sighed. "Your father can't stop me, Liam. This is my home. My name is on every paper." "I know," he said. "That's why it's not fair. We're family. You're supposed to love us." My voice softened. Love isn't about protecting people from the truth. It's about making sure they never forget it. He turned away, muttering something I didn't catch, then stomped up the stairs. The door slammed again. The next day, I called the realtor back. "About that offer," I said. "Tell the buyer I'm considering it. But I'd like to meet her first." When I hung up, I noticed Ellie watching me from the doorway. "You're really going to do it, aren't you?" she asked, voice trembling. "I'm going to do what needs to be done," I replied. "Sometimes people only learn the value of something when they lose it." She looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, "Grandpa used to say you were soft-hearted." I smiled sadly. He was wrong about some things. 3 days later, the realtor arrived with the buyer, a woman in her 40s, hair tied back neatly, smile polite but professional. "Mrs. Taylor, thank you for meeting me," she said. "I'm Sarah Peterson. I work for the community center downtown. We're planning to turn this property into a daycare for children with special needs." My breath caught. A daycare? Of all things. "That's lovely," I said, regaining composure. "Children should have a place like this." She nodded. "We think the garden would be perfect for outdoor therapy, but of course we'd need to make a few changes." Changes? Ramps, wider doors, maybe remove the old porch swing. The porch swing. The one my husband built the summer before he passed, the one where we'd sat every evening watching the sunset. I swallowed hard. "I understand," I said softly. "You'll make it beautiful again." Liam and Ellie stood in the doorway listening. I didn't turn around. I just kept my voice steady. "I'll think about your offer, Mrs. Peterson. You'll hear from my lawyer soon." When they left, Ellie whispered, "You can't let them tear down Grandpa's swing." I looked at her, my throat tight. I can't stop them if the sale goes through. That night, she and Liam stayed up late. I could hear them whispering in the living room, the murmur of voices, the occasional sniffle. Around midnight, the noise stopped. I fell asleep to the sound of rain hitting the windows. The next morning, I found them in the kitchen. Ellie was at the stove making eggs, Liam setting the table. Both looked exhausted but calmer. "We've been thinking," Liam said. "If you're serious about selling, we want to help. Like, pack things, clean up, whatever you need." I looked at them carefully. "And why the sudden change of heart?" He shrugged. "If this is really happening, we should at least do it right. You always said this house deserves respect." There was something in his tone that made me pause. I couldn't tell if it was resignation or something else. "That's very mature of you," I said. They smiled too quickly. I should have known then that something was off. That afternoon, while I was in the garden trimming roses, I noticed them sneaking in and out of the shed, whispering, carrying boxes, giggling nervously. It reminded me of when they were little and plotting birthday surprises. For a moment, I even smiled, but when I went inside later, my smile faded. Every photo, every vase, every framed memory of my husband was gone. The shelves were bare. "Liam!" I called sharply. "Ellie!" They came running, both looking guilty and proud at the same time. "We didn't sell anything," Ellie said quickly. "We just packed it all up." "Packed it where?" Liam pointed toward the shed. "Somewhere safe. You can't sell the house if it looks empty." I opened my mouth to scold them, then stopped. They'd done the wrong thing for the right reason. I could see the fear and love tangled in their eyes. "You're trying to save this place," I said quietly. Liam nodded. "And you, Grandma." For the first time in weeks, my heart softened completely. I reached for them both, pulling them into my arms. "Oh, my loves," I whispered, my voice shaking. "You finally understand." But even as I held them, a new thought crept into my mind, one that chilled me. Because understanding wasn't enough. Actions had consequences, and there was one more truth they still had to face. The house wasn't just mine to sell anymore. 2 months before my husband died, he'd quietly transferred half the ownership into a trust for the children's education. The paperwork was sealed in Mr. Alvarez's office, and now that the house had a real buyer, that trust was about to come alive. When I woke up the next morning, the light coming through the curtains had that heavy golden color that makes the air feel like honey. For a moment, I forgot everything. The fight, the sign on the lawn, the boxes in the shed. For one heartbeat, it was just another quiet morning in my old house, the one where my husband used to hum while making coffee. Then the sound of whispering broke through the haze. Liam and Ellie again. They were outside, standing near the for sale sign. From my window, I could see Liam with a marker in hand, Ellie watching nervously. They were talking too quietly for me to hear, but I could guess what they were doing. I slipped on my robe and stepped out onto the porch. "Don't you dare," I called. They both froze like statues. The sign now read, "Not for sale. Our home," in shaky black letters. Liam dropped the marker. Ellie stepped back. For a moment, none of us spoke. The morning birds kept chirping like nothing had changed. "You two," I said softly, "are really testing the limits of my patience." Ellie's voice trembled. We don't want strangers living here, Grandma." I walked down the steps, the dew on the grass soaking through my slippers. "This isn't about the house anymore. It's about trust." Liam looked down. "We get it, okay? We messed up. But you can't actually sell it. Grandpa built this place." I paused. Grandpa built a lot of things, but he also built lessons into everything he left behind. They didn't understand, not yet. I didn't expect them to. After breakfast, I called Mr. Alvarez. "Did you file the trust papers yet?" "Yes, Joe," he said, "and I've got a feeling you planned this long before the sale sign went up." I smiled faintly. "You know me too well." "The kids will inherit the trust if the sale goes through," he said carefully. "Half of the profit goes directly into their education fund. Are you ready for that conversation?" "As ready as a grandmother with asthma and a temper can be," I said. When I hung up, I sat for a long while staring at the inhaler beside my tea. The label had faded a little. I traced it with my thumb. How strange, I thought, that a piece of plastic could decide whether a person lived or died, and how quickly love could turn careless in the hands of youth. Around noon, the doorbell rang. I expected it to be the realtor, but it was my neighbor, Mr. Howard, the retired history teacher who always smelled faintly of pipe smoke. "Joe," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Heard there's a sale going on. You sure about that?" I smiled. "Everyone in town knows by now, huh?" He chuckled. "You know how it is. People can't mind their own business when there's a for sale sign involved." Then he looked serious. "You okay? I saw the kids out here painting the sign this morning." "I'm fine," I said, though my voice came out thinner than I liked. "It's complicated." He nodded, the kind of nod that comes from a man who's seen enough life not to pry. Before leaving, he said something that stuck with me. "Don't mistake silence for peace, Joe. Kids remember how they're forgiven." That evening, I gathered Liam and Ellie at the table. "We need to talk." They exchanged glances, nervous again. "I spoke to my lawyer today," I said. "Do you know what a trust is?" Liam frowned. "Like money stuff?" "Something like that. Before your grandfather passed, he created one. If I ever sell this house, half the money goes into a fund for you two. College, living expenses, whatever future you choose." Ellie's eyes widened. "So we'd get the money?" "Eventually, but you won't get the house." The silence was sharp enough to cut. "But why?" Liam asked, his voice rising. "Why not just let us live here?" "Because," I said quietly, "you need to build your own home, not live inside the ruins of someone else's." "That's not fair," Ellie cried. "We said we were sorry." "You did," I agreed, "and I believe you. But forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to the way it was." Liam's chair screeched against the floor as he stood. "You're doing this to punish us." I shook my head. "I'm doing this to prepare you." He stormed out again, and this time Ellie didn't follow. She stayed seated, shoulders shaking. "Grandma," she whispered, "when you almost died, did you hate us?" My heart broke a little at that. "No, sweetheart, I didn't hate you. I was just sad, because in that moment I realized how little you understood about love." That night, after everyone went to bed, I couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the old window frames. My chest tightened. And for a terrible second, I reached for my inhaler and didn't feel it. Panic flashed, but then my hand brushed it under the pillow. I let out a shaky laugh. Even now, I kept testing my own fear. The next day, Liam didn't come home after school. Again. I didn't panic this time. I waited. At sunset, he appeared on the porch with a paper bag in his hand. "Here," he said, holding it out awkwardly. Inside were 3 new inhalers. I used the money I was saving for sneakers. I stared at him, speechless. "Liam, I know you said it's not about gifts," he said quickly, "but I wanted to show you that I get it now. What it means when you can't breathe. What it means when someone takes something you need to live." Tears stung my eyes. For the first time since that awful day, I saw my grandson again. Not the angry boy, not the thoughtless teenager, but the small child who used to bring me wildflowers and say they were free gifts from God. I reached out and hugged him. Really hugged him. His shoulders were stiff at first, then they softened. "You're growing up," I whispered. He laughed weakly. "Took long enough." Later that evening, I called Mr. Alvarez again. "Put the sale on hold," I said. He chuckled. "Changed your mind?" "Not exactly, just delaying the lesson's ending." I thought the storm had finally passed, but peace never stays long in this house. 3 days later, I came home from the grocery store and found the front door wide open. The for sale sign was gone from the lawn. My heart dropped. Inside, Ellie was crying on the stairs. "Grandma," she sobbed. Dad came. He took the sign down. He said you're not thinking straight and that we're moving in with him. I stood frozen in the hallway, my shopping bag slipping from my hands, apples rolling across the floor. "What?" "He said he talked to the realtor, that you're making rash decisions because of your medication." The world tilted. The irony was almost too much to bear. The man I'd raised, the boy who'd grown up watching me fight for every breath, now thinking I was losing my mind. I picked up one of the fallen apples, its red skin shining in the afternoon light, and said quietly, "Then it looks like my son just made himself part of the lesson, too." I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark standing in the hallway, his arms crossed like he was the parent and I was the child. I hadn't even seen him yet. But Ellie's words were enough to conjure the scene, his look of exasperated concern, the same one he'd used when I used to tell him to wear a scarf in winter. Back then it was love. Now it was doubt. Around 6 a.m., I heard a car door slam. I knew that sound too well, the heavy thud of my son's old SUV. I stayed in my chair by the window, inhaler in hand, watching him march up the walkway. He didn't even knock. He just came in. "Mom," he said, "we need to talk." He said it the same way he used to tell his kids they were grounded. I didn't answer, just waited while he paced the room, his hands tightening into fists. He glanced at the kitchen table where the paperwork from the trust still lay in a neat stack. "What's all this?" he demanded. "The truth," I said simply. "Ellie told me you're selling the house. She was crying all night. You can't just scare them like that." "Scare them?" I echoed. "Mark, they took my inhaler. I almost died on that floor." He froze, the color draining from his face. "What?" "They didn't tell you that part, did they?" He swallowed hard. "They said it was a stupid prank. I didn't think—" "No," I cut him off. "You didn't think either. That's the problem with all of you. You think love is enough to erase carelessness. It isn't." He sank into a chair, his face pale. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was that serious." I sat across from him, the early sunlight cutting through the blinds. "When your father died, I promised myself I'd keep this house full of life. But lately, it's been full of noise. Screens, laughter without kindness, words without weight. I couldn't breathe even when my lungs worked." He rubbed his eyes. "They're kids, Mom. They made a mistake." "I made mistakes too," I said, like thinking I could fix them by protecting them from consequence. He looked up sharply. So you really want to sell? I wanted them to see what it feels like to lose something that matters. Now I want them to see what it means to earn it back. For a long moment, we just sat there in silence. Then Mark sighed. I'll talk to them again. But Mom, don't shut us out. They're scared. So am I. Good, I said softly. Fear means you still care. He left after breakfast, promising to call. When the door closed, the house felt smaller, but lighter somehow. I went out to the garden, trimming the lavender that had gone wild. The smell of it reminded me of the summer my husband built the porch swing. He'd always said a garden was a mirror of a home. Neglect it and everything withers. By afternoon, the kids were quiet. Too quiet. I found them in the shed, surrounded by the boxes they'd packed. Ellie was crying again, but Liam was calm this time. We've been talking, he said. If you really want to sell, we get it. But could we have one more week to help you pack, to say goodbye properly? I studied him for a long moment. The boy who used to slam doors was gone. This one looked me in the eye, steady, sincere. 1 week, I said, and you both help with everything. They agreed instantly. Over the next few days, something remarkable happened. We became a family again. They helped me clean out the attic, dusted the old photo frames, laughed over the terrible clothes their father used to wear. I told them stories about their grandfather, how he once tried to fix the washing machine and flooded the kitchen, how he'd wake up at 3 a.m. to check if the tomatoes were growing. They listened, really listened, their faces glowing in the dusty afternoon light. On the 4th day, Ellie found a shoebox full of letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. "What's this?" she asked. "Your grandfather's," I said, taking the box gently. "He wrote me every week when he was working out of town. I never threw them away." "Can we read one?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. She opened one carefully, the paper soft with age. My husband's handwriting slanted across the page. "Joe, every breath without you feels borrowed. Every day I come home, I feel whole again." Ellie's voice cracked halfway through. When she finished, no one spoke. The air felt sacred. That night, Liam came into my room holding one of the letters. "Grandpa said you were the strongest person he ever knew," he said quietly. He was right. I smiled. "Strength doesn't mean you never break, sweetheart. It just means you know how to rebuild." The next morning, a letter arrived from Mr. Alvarez. I opened it over breakfast. Inside was a short note. "Joe, trust paperwork complete. Upon your decision, ownership transfer can proceed immediately. Funds will move to Educational Trust automatically. Call me when ready." I stared at it for a long time. The kids watched me silently. Finally, I folded the letter and set it down. "You know," I said slowly, "your grandfather and I built this home so our family would always have somewhere to return to. But somewhere along the way, you started thinking it was just walls and furniture." Ellie reached for my hand. "It's not just a house anymore, Grandma. It's where we learn to breathe again." Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. I pressed her hand to my heart. "Then maybe it's finally done its job." Liam frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled faintly. "It means I'm not selling it." Their faces lit up, but before they could celebrate, I raised a hand. "But I am leaving, at least for a while." "What?" Ellie gasped. "Where are you going?" "Somewhere peaceful. The coast, maybe. I've spent my whole life keeping everyone else alive. It's time I learned how to breathe for myself." The silence that followed was heavy with something between shock and understanding. Liam finally said, "You're still leaving us a lesson, aren't you?" I chuckled softly. Of course, every goodbye is one. That night, after they went to bed, I stood on the porch, inhaler in one hand, a packed suitcase in the other. The moonlight glowed on the swing. I sat down and took one long breath. Slow, steady, easy. The air felt lighter than it had in years. Behind me, the house stood quiet and still. Tomorrow I would lock the door and leave them to the life they'd just begun to rebuild. But I knew this much: they'd never look at me, or an inhaler, the same way again. I drove away before sunrise. The air was pale blue, still heavy with mist, the kind that makes everything look softer than it really is. The gravel crunched under the tires, and for a moment, I thought about stopping, just to look back. But I didn't. Some goodbyes work better when you don't turn around. The road stretched ahead, quiet and endless. My lungs felt tight, but it wasn't asthma this time. It was the ache of leaving something behind that had defined you for too long. I touched the inhaler resting in the cup holder. For years, that little piece of plastic had been my lifeline. Now it was also my reminder: breathe when it's hard, but don't let anyone take your air again. I reached the coast by noon. The ocean wind hit my face like a blessing. It smelled of salt and something wild, something alive. I rented a small cottage on a hill overlooking the water, a white house with peeling paint and creaky floors. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine for now. That first night I made tea and watched the waves crash against the rocks. The sound was steady, ancient, forgiving. For the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped inside my body. I just breathed. On the second morning, the phone rang. Ellie. Her voice came through shaky and bright all at once. "Grandma, you made it okay." "I did," I said, smiling, even though she couldn't see it. "How's the house?" She laughed softly. "Quiet. We're keeping it clean, I swear." "And Liam?" "He's different now. He joined the volunteer group at school. They're collecting old medical supplies to donate. He said it's his way of saying thank you." That caught me off guard. I pressed the phone closer. "He said that?" "Yeah," she said. "He even made a presentation about asthma for health class. Everyone clapped. I think he gets it now." I closed my eyes, letting her words wash over me. Maybe all the pain had finally meant something. Maybe the lesson had settled deeper than guilt. It had turned into care. "Tell him I'm proud," I whispered. "I will," she said. "Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Dad's sorry, too. He said he didn't understand how much you went through until he saw your note." "My note?" "The one you left on the kitchen table. Don't wait for breath to remember love." I smiled. I hadn't realized they'd found it so soon. "Your grandpa used to say something like that," I told her. "He always said love's not loud. It's in the quiet moments when you choose to stay kind." There was a pause. Then Ellie said softly, "We're going to visit you soon. Dad said we'll drive down next weekend." "Good," I said. "Bring cookies, the kind with chocolate chips. The sea air makes me hungry." We both laughed, and when I hung up, I sat for a long time watching the tide pull back and return again, endless and patient. Later that afternoon, I walked along the shore, shoes in hand, the water cold around my ankles. Every breath felt easier. I thought of Liam and Ellie, of their scared little faces, and the way they'd clung to me when they finally understood. I thought of Mark, trying to fix what he'd ignored for too long. And I thought of my husband, the way he'd always believed that family, like a garden, could bloom again if you were willing to dig deep and water the roots. When I got back to the cottage, there was a small package waiting at the door. Inside, a framed photo, the one of all of us on the porch swing, taken years ago when my hair was still dark and the kids were small enough to fit on my lap. Underneath it, a note in Liam's messy handwriting, "To Grandma, for teaching us to breathe, not just with our lungs, but with our hearts." I sat there, holding that frame against my chest, and cried in a way that didn't hurt. That evening, I placed the photo on the windowsill where the sunset could touch it. Then I made tea, sat in the old rocking chair, and took one deep breath after another. The ocean roared, steady as my pulse. The house creaked around me, alive with silence. I wasn't angry anymore, not even sad, just full of air, of love, of the slow, forgiving kind of peace that only comes after you've nearly lost everything and learned what truly matters. Tomorrow, I'd start painting the cottage. Maybe lavender like the flowers in my garden back home, maybe something new. Whatever color I chose, it would smell like freedom. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't need a single thing to help me breathe.